This video is made possible by Rocket Money. More about them later. The world, 1598. Portugal is doing empire differently. They don't have the same resources as Spain or Britain, so instead of conquering entire continents, the Portuguese created an enormous network of small but efficient trading colonies stretching across the entire globe. Imagine it like Airbnb. They have traditional competitors, but they're everywhere, they're causing some problems, and they're making gobs of money. Another small but sea-savvy nation, the Dutch, have just gotten their independence, and they want in on that action. In 1598, 5 Dutch ships set sail for the New World, and on board one of those ships is an English navigator named William Adams. William Adams doesn't know it yet, but he is about to have a very bad time. The plan was to sail through the Straits of Magellan, loop under the southern end of South America, and then come back up and do some trading on the west coast. If you've seen my Magellan videos, you would know this route sucks. Sailing on one of these ships is an experience somewhere between prison and a death sentence. The survival rate on Magellan's expedition was 6.5%. You've got better odds of getting into Cornell than making it home alive. There's an old expression, worse things happen at sea, and this kind of voyage is where those things happen. Oh yeah, and the Netherlands in 1598 is at war with both Spain and Portugal, so if they land in any of these areas and run into Europeans, they'd better be ready for a fight. Adams' crew had made it as far as North Africa when they had to start rationing their bread. By the time they reached Cape Verde, still off the coast of Africa, the expedition leader had died of disease. Did I mention Cape Verde is Portuguese? The crew fought to the death with the Portuguese, took over their castle, and found nothing of value. They set sail again for the New World, got blown off course. More men died of scurvy and dysentery, forcing them to land on another Portuguese island, meaning it's time to grab your rifles and fight to the death again, and the Portuguese burned down everything of value. The crew finally sets sail across the Atlantic. More men die of starvation. They get to the Straits of Magellan and then have to wait 4 months eating penguins to survive because the weather was so bad. The fleet gets to the other side and all of the ships get separated. 27 people on Adams' ship get killed by South American natives, but they got a better break than one of the other ships that got completely slaughtered by the Portuguese. The plan had been to go to Japan if things went poorly, and safe to say things were going pretty poorly. Good thing getting to Japan only required crossing the entire Pacific Ocean. So in the year 1600, this great honking ship lands in Japan, and there are 9 dudes left alive on board. 9人でこれを上陸させたのか? Is this the end for me? Oh, my sweet fallen comrades! Mahu, Beuningen, Julian van Boekhout. If I die, at least in heaven I'll get to call you by your silly, silly names. One last time. The weary sailors were taken in by the local lord of the province they landed in, who treated them with honor and nursed them back to health. A few days later, he sends for a translator so he can ask the crew some questions. The translator is Portuguese. Frick. The Portuguese had been trading in Japan for a few decades at this point, and with their merchants came a bunch of Jesuit priests trying to wololo Japan into becoming Catholic. And they'd conveniently omitted the fact that things like Protestant countries existed. So when they saw a bunch of Protestant sailors from a rival empire they were actively at war with, His Grace would like to know why you have come. Tell His Grace that we have come on a mission of trade and want to bring silver and gold to this land. Yatsura wa kaizoku desu. Is there anyone else who can translate? Kare wa anata no gokazoku ni shi o nagatte orimasu. Yatsura wo uchitoru ka? The crew is thrown into prison, but instead of being executed, Adams is taken to meet with Lord Tokugawa Ieyasu, who is like one of the biggest figures in Japanese history. TLDR, there was a lot of drama and things aren't 100% stable yet. Japan had been fractured into like 100 different warring states. A man named Oda Nobunaga started putting Japan back together and then died. Nobunaga's son was 2 years old, so another guy named Toyotomi Hideyoshi took power, failed to invade Korea, and then died. Hideyoshi's son was 5 years old, so Tokugawa Ieyasu took power. Except, because of all of these weird inheritance shenanigans, there was another guy trying to do basically the same thing. So he and Tokugawa Ieyasu are about to have a big battle, and Ieyasu wants to know if there's anything these foreigners can offer to help him win. So Adams finds himself in Osaka Castle. This is a surprisingly nice prison. Kansha itashimasu. Oh, I'm sorry, I really... Skoshi mattare yo. Is this any better? So much better. Figures. Sorry, I just don't like subtitles. It's too much reading. So you mean to tell me this is a real... You're going to fight wars with this castle? It's so pretty and decorative. We were thinking it could be a nice tourist attraction in the future. Well, you're doing a great job. You know, I would love to visit this castle if I weren't already imprisoned in it. Oh yeah, by the way, I'm hosting a trip to Japan and we're going to Osaka Castle with some local guides. Check it out, we got a few spots left. Ieyasu asks where Adams is from. Adams says England. Ieyasu asks if England is at war with anyone. Adams says, yeah, Portugal and Spain. Ieyasu realizes the Jesuits pulled the wool over his eyes. He lets Adams out of prison and gives him new orders. Adams pilots his ship to Ieyasu's new capital of Edo. It was a sleepy country town then, but Ieyasu had big plans for it. Cat cafes, bullet trains, and 7-Elevens on every corner. Adams takes the cannons off the ship and teaches Ieyasu's army how to work them, and joins Ieyasu's forces in the Battle of Sekigahara, which finally secured Ieyasu's control over the country and decided the future of Japan for the next 200 years. Adams was such a useful asset to Ieyasu that he was paid handsomely in Portuguese reals. He couldn't spend those Portuguese reals outside of Japan because he was such a useful asset to Ieyasu that he wasn't allowed to leave Japan. Now that the Civil War was over, Adams became Ieyasu's go-to guy on matters of diplomacy with the West. He helped negotiate trade deals with the Dutch and the Spanish, and helped Ieyasu's government construct their first Western-style ship. As he did all this, he slowly became familiar with Japanese customs and practices. He earned a new name, the rank of samurai, and even took a Japanese wife, although his heart still yearned for home. In 1605, he convinced Ieyasu to invite the Dutch to trade with Japan, and 4 years later, they finally arrived. Hallo, min Name is Puik und dit is Vandenbroek. Yes! Yes! Oh, God, I missed you, Dutchman! The Dutch set up their factory in Nagasaki, where, spoilers, they would be the only ones allowed to trade with Japan for most of the next 200 years, because you remember how the Portuguese brought those Jesuit missionaries with them everywhere they went? The Dutch kept money and Jesus separate, whereas the Portuguese Jesuits were causing more and more problems for Ieyasu, who eventually ordered them all to be banished from the country, along with any Japanese who didn't unconvert quick. Now, Adams was celebrating the arrival of the Dutch, not just to stick it to the Portuguese, although that was probably a reason, but also because they represented his first opportunity to send a letter back home to tell his family he was still alive. When his letters arrive in England, the English are convinced there's money to be made in Japan, and they send their own ships in 1613. Adams at first is excited. It's the first time he's seen his countrymen in 15 years. He takes them to Sumpu Castle and the Great Buddha in Hase, and then on to Edo to meet Ieyasu's son, who sends them home with gifts, including a full set of armor for King James I. King James I, the guy who published the King James Bible, had actual samurai armor. What the heck? This is it. This is his actual armor. That's awesome. In 1614, the aging Tokugawa Ieyasu finally gave Adams permission to go back to England. Go on! Shoo! I don't want to anymore! But a funny thing happened. While Adams was helping the English to set up their factory in Japan, he noticed just how un-English he had become. They were always frustrated with me for doing things the Japanese way, and more than that, they took phone calls on the subway and stood on the wrong side of the escalator. I can't go back to those savages. Besides, I prefer subtitles. Sonata wa hokori ni omou zo. Adams chose to stay in Japan. He had a mansion and servants and money and the favor of the Tokugawas, but he did also spend the rest of his life sailing the seas and going on misadventures in East Asia until, shocker, he died of a tropical disease. The sailor's way. As chance would have it, I've been saving up for my own trip across the Pacific to Japan. I wanted to get on top of my expenses, so I got help from today's sponsor, Rocket Money. Rocket Money is the personal finance app that helps you cancel subscriptions, lower bills, and manage your money better. Let me tell you about my experience with Rocket Money. I signed up to write this ad. I discovered that on top of a free trial, your subscription to Rocket Money is also a sliding scale where you pay whatever you think their service is worth. And Rocket Money can save you up to $740 a year when using all of the app's features. But, I'm very thrifty. I hardly sign up for anything. I figure I'm gonna have to find something else to talk about besides my personal experience. I still found a subscription I forgot I was signed up for and have been paying for literal years. Years! That's a couple $100 I could have saved right there if I'd signed up sooner. But on top of that, it can help negotiate your bills for you by uploading a photo through the app. Now I'm tracking my budget and building my savings for language school. To save more and spend less, join the over 5 million members using Rocket Money today. Go to rocketmoney.com/historyabridged or click on the link in the description to get started for free.